What if I told you that some of the divine laws we commonly associate with Moses and the Ten Commandments were already being followed long before they were officially written on tablets of stone? According to the banned books from the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible, like the Book of Jubilees and the Book of Enoch, these sacred laws were first given to Adam at the dawn of creation. Passed down through the patriarchs, Noah, Abraham, and finally Moses, these laws have shaped humanity's relationship with God throughout history, yet much of this story was almost forgotten. In the Bible, you might recall God's command to Adam and Eve in Genesis, "Do not eat from the tree of knowledge," Genesis 2:16-17. And later, we read of Cain and Abel offering sacrifices, Genesis 4:3-4. But what if there's more to these stories? The Book of Jubilees reveals that Adam was entrusted with divine laws about the Sabbath, sacrifice, and purity, far earlier than we usually think. These commandments were passed down through generations, showing that Moses wasn't receiving new laws, but formalizing an ancient tradition. In today's video, we'll dive into the hidden knowledge found in the banned books, comparing it to the Bible's own accounts. For example, while Genesis briefly tells us that Noah built an altar and offered sacrifices after the flood, Genesis 8:20, the Book of Jubilees expands on this, explaining how Noah was following the same laws of sacrifice, purity, and the Sabbath that had been passed down from Adam. These books reveal a powerful truth. The laws that were later codified by Moses have existed from the very beginning, guiding all of humanity. If you're curious to learn more about how these ancient laws shaped Adam, Noah, and Abraham, then stay tuned. And if this topic interests you, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Deep Bible Stories. We've also covered other banned books like the Book of Enoch and the Book of Jubilees. Check the description for those videos and links. The Bible introduces us to Adam as the first human placed in the Garden of Eden and commanded by God not to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, Genesis 2:16-17. But did you know that according to the Book of Jubilees and other banned texts, Adam received a much broader set of divine laws that would guide humanity's relationship with God for generations? In these banned books, Adam wasn't just the first man, he was the first lawkeeper, entrusted with sacred commandments that were passed down through his descendants. These included foundational principles like the Sabbath, laws of sacrifice, and maintaining purity before God. Let's break down these ancient laws and explore how they relate to what we know from the Bible. In the Bible, the concept of the Sabbath originates in Genesis, where God rested on the seventh day after creating the heavens and the earth, Genesis 2:2-3. Later, when Moses receives the Ten Commandments, the Israelites are commanded to observe the Sabbath as a holy day, Exodus 28-11. But according to the Book of Jubilees, Jubilees 2:17-24, the Sabbath wasn't a new concept that started with Moses. Instead, it was first established with Adam. And it wasn't just for Israel, it was a universal law for all of humanity. God instructed Adam to observe the Sabbath as a day of rest and worship, passing this sacred practice down through the generations. This makes the Sabbath much more than an Israelite tradition. It was meant for all people, starting from Adam, to remind humanity that God is the Creator, and to help us rest from our work and reconnect with His divine rhythm. The Sabbath is more than just a day of rest. It's a spiritual practice. It reminds us that we are part of God's creation and that we must take time to pause, reflect, and honor Him. According to the banned books, observing the Sabbath was essential for maintaining a close relationship with God. In Jubilees, failing to observe the Sabbath led to spiritual chaos, showing that this practice was designed to keep humanity aligned with God's divine order from the very beginning. In both the Bible and the banned books, the Sabbath isn't just about avoiding work. It's a way to engage in spiritual renewal, a way to remember that God is the Creator and we are His people. Were you surprised to learn that the Sabbath was given to Adam? How does this change the way you think about the Sabbath? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. The concept of sacrifice shows up early in the Bible. In Genesis, we read about Cain and Abel offering sacrifices to God, but we don't get many details about why or where they learned this practice. Genesis 4:3-4. According to the book of Jubilees, Jubilees 3:27, however, Adam himself was the first to offer sacrifices, instructed by God after the fall. These sacrifices were a way to atone for sin and show worship and obedience to God. In the banned books, sacrifices weren't just offerings, they were deeply symbolic acts of reconciliation between humanity and God. They signified the mending of the relationship damaged by sin. Adam's sacrifices became a model for the sacrifices that would later be commanded in the Levitical laws under Moses, Leviticus 1-7. While the Bible gives detailed instructions on different types of offerings under Moses, Jubilees shows that these weren't entirely new laws. They were part of the divine system established with Adam. So while Genesis shows us Cain and Abel making offerings to God, the book of Jubilees reveals that sacrifice was a divine command given to Adam, and this practice was handed down through generations to Noah, Abraham, and later Moses. When you think of purity laws, your mind might go to the book of Leviticus, where the Israelites were given detailed instructions on how to stay ritually clean and holy. But what if these purity laws were actually passed down from Adam himself? According to the book of Jubilees, Jubilees 3:8-14, after the fall, God taught Adam laws of purity, rules about how to live in holiness and remain spiritually clean before God. These laws weren't just about physical cleanliness. They were about maintaining a state of spiritual purity, which would later be expanded under the Mosaic law. Purity was essential for maintaining a connection with God. The laws of purity covered everything from marriage to sacrificial offerings, ensuring that Adam and his descendants would be able to approach God in a state of holiness. While the Levitical law later outlines these practices in more detail, Leviticus 11-15, the banned books show us that Adam was already practicing these laws long before Moses. This gives us a broader view of why purity was so important throughout the Bible. It wasn't just a religious obligation, it was a way to live in spiritual alignment with God's divine will. The Bible tells us that when Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, their eyes were opened to their nakedness and to the concept of sin, Genesis 3:1-7. But the book of Enoch reveals that this knowledge was much deeper. It involved an awareness of the spiritual battle between good and evil that began when the Watchers, fallen angels, corrupted the earth. In the Bible, the knowledge of good and evil made Adam and Eve aware of their sin and their need for redemption. But the banned books expand on this, showing that Adam became aware of the cosmic conflict between good and evil, which included fallen angels and demonic forces that sought to lead humanity astray. This broader perspective highlights the spiritual warfare that would shape the rest of human history, a theme echoed throughout the Bible, but greatly expanded in the book of Enoch. After the devastating flood wiped out the corruption that had overtaken the world, Noah became the central figure through whom God would renew his laws and re-establish order on the earth. The Bible tells us that Noah was chosen because he was righteous in his generation, Genesis 6:9. But did you know that the banned books, particularly the Book of Jubilees and the Book of Enoch, reveal deeper spiritual details about the laws that Noah was commanded to follow? These laws ensured that humanity, once again, would live in alignment with God's divine order. In this section, we'll uncover how Noah inherited these divine laws and passed them on to his descendants, ensuring that the commandments first given to Adam continued to shape humanity's relationship with God. The Bible shows us that after the flood, one of the first things Noah did was build an altar and offer sacrifices to God. Genesis 8:20. This offering pleased God, and he made a covenant with Noah, promising never again to destroy the earth with a flood. Genesis 9:11. But what we don't see in the Bible is where Noah learned to offer these sacrifices. According to the Book of Jubilees, Jubilees 6:1-5, Noah was taught the practice of sacrifice by God, just as Adam had been. In the banned books, the practice of sacrifice was more than just a ritual. It was a critical part of maintaining the relationship between God and humanity. By offering sacrifices, Noah was continuing the covenant established with Adam and ensuring that his descendants would be in right standing with God. These sacrifices were a way to atone for the sin that had brought about the flood in the first place. While the Bible briefly mentions Noah's altar and sacrifice, Genesis 8:20, the Book of Jubilees expands on this by showing that these sacrifices were an ancient practice passed down from Adam. It wasn't something Noah invented, it was part of the divine system that had been in place since the creation of the world. This act of offering sacrifices was a way to restore order after the chaos of the flood, ensuring that God's blessings would continue for future generations. Did you know that Noah's sacrifices were part of an ancient law given to Adam? How does this change your understanding of sacrifice in the Bible? Let us know in the comments below. After the flood, God instructed Noah to repopulate the earth, but it wasn't just about physical survival, it was about spiritual renewal. According to the Book of Jubilees, Jubilees 7:20-30, God gave Noah specific purity laws to ensure that the new humanity would remain holy and avoid the corruption that had led to the flood. These laws covered everything from sexual purity to avoiding contact with the Nephilim, the offspring of the fallen angels, who had spread evil throughout the earth. In the Bible, God tells Noah and his descendants to be fruitful and multiply, and to avoid consuming blood as part of their diet. Genesis 9:1-4. This commandment about blood highlights the importance of maintaining purity and respecting life, which is further developed in the Levitical purity laws given to Moses, Leviticus 17:10-14. However, the banned books provide much more detail, showing that Noah was given instructions on how to live in holiness, ensuring that the post-flood world would not fall into the same wickedness as before. In the Book of Jubilees, purity laws go beyond physical cleanliness. They were about ensuring that Noah and his descendants remained spiritually pure, especially in their relationships and worship. Noah was commanded to avoid any defiling practices, including marriage with the descendants of the fallen angels, the Nephilim. This was crucial for keeping the earth holy and ensuring that God's blessing remained on Noah's family. While the Bible gives us the basic guidelines for purity, the banned books expand this to show that these laws were part of a much larger battle between good and evil. Noah's descendants were to avoid the corruption that had plagued the earth before the flood, ensuring that they would remain in right relationship with God. Just as Adam was commanded to keep the Sabbath, so too was Noah. The Book of Jubilees, Jubilees 6:23-30, emphasizes that the Sabbath wasn't just for Israel, it was a law for all of humanity, passed down from Adam to Noah and his descendants. The Bible doesn't explicitly mention Noah observing the Sabbath, but we do see the importance of the Sabbath later when God gives the law to Moses, Exodus 28-11. In the banned books, the Sabbath is described as a universal law, meant to be observed by all people as a way of honoring God's creation. The Sabbath wasn't just about rest, it was a way to keep humanity aligned with God's divine plan. According to the Book of Jubilees, Noah and his descendants were reminded to observe the Sabbath after the flood as a sign of their continued obedience to God. The Sabbath, as introduced in Genesis and later in Exodus, is a day of rest, reflecting the seventh day of creation, when God rested. But the banned books show us that this practice wasn't just a part of the Mosaic law. It was something Noah was commanded to observe long before Moses. The Sabbath was a way to maintain the spiritual rhythm established at the beginning of time, a practice that would help humanity stay connected to the divine order. The Bible tells us that after the flood, God made a covenant with Noah, promising never again to destroy the earth with a flood, Genesis 9:11. But the book of Enoch reveals that Noah lived in a world where spiritual warfare was still very real. The Watchers, or fallen angels, had corrupted humanity before the flood, and after their defeat, the spirits of their offspring, the Nephilim, roamed the earth as evil spirits. While the Bible focuses on the covenant God made with Noah, the banned books show that Noah was aware of the ongoing spiritual battle. The book of Enoch reveals that Noah and his descendants had to remain vigilant against the influence of these demonic forces who sought to lead humanity astray. In the Bible, Noah is portrayed as righteous and obedient, faithfully carrying out God's commands. But in the banned books, Noah is also a key figure in the spiritual warfare that began with Adam. He wasn't just rebuilding humanity physically, he was leading the fight against the evil spirits that still plagued the earth. This awareness of the knowledge of good and evil gave Noah the responsibility of keeping his family spiritually pure, resisting the influence of the Nephilim and remaining faithful to God's laws. As we arrive at Abraham, we enter a pivotal moment in biblical history. Not only did Abraham receive incredible promises from God, promises of descendants and a homeland, but he also inherited the divine laws that had been passed down from Adam and Noah. According to the Bible, Abraham becomes the father of faith, but the banned books reveal deeper layers of the covenant, showing that Abraham was entrusted with these ancient laws to shape his family and ultimately the entire nation of Israel. In this section, we'll examine how the laws of circumcision, sacrifice, purity, and the Sabbath were not new when Abraham received them, but were part of a long-standing tradition that connected him to the divine plan laid out for humanity since the beginning. In the Bible, the law of circumcision is first introduced in Genesis 17, when God makes a covenant with Abraham, telling him that all males in his household must be circumcised as a sign of the covenant. But according to the book of Jubilees, Jubilees 15:25-34, this wasn't the first time circumcision appeared in history. It was part of an ancient law practiced by Adam and Noah, long before Abraham was commanded to carry it out. In Genesis 17, God instructs Abraham to circumcise all males in his household as a way of marking his descendants as God's chosen people. This act of circumcision set Abraham's family apart from the surrounding nations, showing their unique relationship with God. However, the banned books expand on this, revealing that circumcision was not just a physical act, but a spiritual commitment. According to the book of Jubilees, the practice had already been given to Adam and Noah as a sign of their faithfulness to God's law. By re-establishing this tradition, Abraham was renewing an ancient covenant, and his obedience was seen as a continuation of the original plan that began with Adam. So while Genesis introduces circumcision as a new covenant between God and Abraham, the banned books tell us that Abraham was actually restoring a divine commandment that had existed for generations. Circumcision wasn't just a tradition unique to Israel. It was a universal law intended for all of humanity. One of the most striking moments in the story of Abraham is the sacrifice of Isaac, Genesis 22. This event is often seen as the ultimate test of Abraham's faith, but according to the banned books, the concept of sacrifice wasn't something new. Abraham was continuing the ancient practice of offering sacrifices that began with Adam and Noah. In Genesis 22, God commands Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac as a burnt offering. This event is a powerful display of Abraham's trust in God, as he was willing to obey even the most difficult command. But in the Book of Jubilees, Jubilees 18:9-18, this story is connected to the ancient law of sacrifice, which had been passed down through the generations. Abraham was already familiar with the practice of offering sacrifices to God as a way to atone for sin and express devotion. The banned books go further by showing that Abraham's near sacrifice of Isaac was a continuation of the divine law given to Adam and Noah. In this context, sacrifice wasn't just an isolated event. It was part of an ongoing tradition that demonstrated submission to God's will and the renewal of the covenant between humanity and the Creator. While the Bible focuses on Abraham's test of faith, the banned books give us a deeper understanding of why sacrifice was so important. For Abraham, the willingness to sacrifice Isaac was an act of complete obedience, following a law that had been in place since the beginning of time. The laws of purity, laws governing cleanliness and holiness, play a significant role in the Bible, especially in the Levitical law given to Moses. But did you know that Abraham was already practicing these laws long before they were officially written down? According to the Book of Jubilees, Jubilees 21-7, Abraham was given specific instructions from God about how to live a life of purity and pass these laws on to his descendants. In Genesis, we don't see explicit purity laws, but the banned books reveal that Abraham was deeply concerned with the holiness of his family. In the Book of Jubilees, Abraham was commanded to avoid intermarriage with the Canaanites, whose practices were considered defiling. These laws of purity were designed to maintain a holy lineage, ensuring that Abraham's descendants would remain faithful to God. While the Bible introduces detailed purity laws during the time of Moses, the banned books show that Abraham was already following these principles. He ensured that his family adhered to rules about marriage, cleanliness, and ritual purity as a way to remain in right standing with God. For Abraham, these laws were not just about external cleanliness. They were about preserving the holiness of the covenant people. These laws, passed down from Adam and Noah, were essential for maintaining the purity of the nation that would eventually become Israel. Just like Adam and Noah, Abraham was commanded to observe the Sabbath. The Book of Jubilees, Jubilees 56:13, makes it clear that the Sabbath wasn't just a law for Israel. It was a universal law that had been in place since the beginning of creation. The Bible doesn't explicitly mention Abraham keeping the Sabbath, but the banned books reveal that Abraham was faithful in observing this holy day. What does the Sabbath mean, and how was it applied? The Sabbath is introduced in Genesis as the day when God rested after creating the world, Genesis 2:2-3. It's later formalized in the Mosaic Law as a day of rest for the Israelites, Exodus 28:11. But according to the banned books, the Sabbath was already a crucial part of the divine law that Abraham followed. The Book of Jubilees tells us that Abraham observed the Sabbath as a way of maintaining his connection to the divine order established at creation. For Abraham, the Sabbath was not just a day of physical rest. It was a time of spiritual renewal and reflection on God's covenant. In the banned books, the Sabbath is described as a cosmic law, one that even the angels observe in heaven. By keeping the Sabbath, Abraham was aligning himself with the eternal plan of God, continuing the practice that had been handed down from Adam and Noah. As we come to Moses, we reach the moment when the divine laws passed down from Adam, Noah, and Abraham are formally codified and written into the Torah. While Moses is often seen as the great lawgiver, the banned books tell us that many of the laws given to him on Mount Sinai were not entirely new. They were part of the ancient laws that had guided humanity since creation, laws that were finally organized and made official for the nation of Israel. The Ten Commandments are perhaps the most famous part of the Mosaic law given to Moses on Mount Sinai. Exodus 20. These 10 principles form the foundation of the covenant between God and the Israelites, covering everything from worship to moral behavior. But according to the banned books, like the Book of Jubilees and the Book of Enoch, many of these commandments weren't new. They had been part of God's law since the beginning of time. In Exodus 20, the 10 Commandments are presented as a new covenant between God and Israel, but the banned books tell us that these principles had been followed by the righteous from the time of Adam. For example, the command to honor the Sabbath was already given to Adam and Noah, and the laws against murder, theft, and adultery were part of the moral code passed down to Abraham. The Book of Jubilees, Jubilees 2:23-24, emphasizes that these laws were part of the eternal plan, guiding humanity since the creation of the world. The 10 Commandments, as formalized by Moses, were a renewal of the ancient law and were meant to bring the Israelites back into alignment with God's original design for humanity. In this context, Moses wasn't introducing a completely new legal system. He was continuing the divine tradition that had begun with Adam and had been followed by the faithful ever since. The 10 Commandments were simply the next step in formalizing these ancient laws for the nation of Israel. How does knowing that the 10 Commandments were part of an ancient tradition change your view of them? Do you think they hold even more significance now? Share your thoughts in the comments. The Sabbath is one of the central themes of the Mosaic Law, but the banned books reveal that this practice wasn't exclusive to Moses or even the Israelites. According to the Book of Jubilees, the Sabbath was part of God's divine order, established at the creation of the world and passed down through every generation. In Exodus 28:11, the Sabbath is commanded as a day of rest for the Israelites, a day to reflect on God's creation and to cease from all work. But according to the banned books, the Sabbath had been observed by Adam, Noah, and Abraham before Moses received the law at Mount Sinai. The Book of Jubilees, Jubilees 56:13, describes the Sabbath as a cosmic law, observed not only by humanity, but also by the angels in heaven. It wasn't just a rest day for Israel, it was a universal law meant for all of creation. By keeping the Sabbath, Moses was reaffirming a practice that had been in place since the beginning, one that connected Israel to God's eternal order. For the Israelites, the Sabbath was a sign of their covenant with God. But the banned books expand this to show that the Sabbath was always intended to be a day of spiritual renewal for all of humanity. It wasn't just about physical rest. It was about aligning oneself with God's design for time and creation. The purity laws given to Moses in the book of Leviticus are extensive, covering everything from clean and unclean animals to ritual cleanliness. But the banned books reveal that these laws didn't start with Moses. They had been practiced by Adam, Noah, and Abraham long before they were written down. In Leviticus 11-15, we find detailed instructions on how the Israelites were to maintain purity, both in their personal lives and in their worship. These laws covered issues like clean foods, ritual washing, and how to avoid defilement through contact with the unclean. However, according to the Book of Jubilees, Jubilees 7:20-30, these laws of purity were not new to Moses. They had already been given to Noah after the flood. In fact, the banned books reveal that the purity laws were introduced to Adam as part of his instructions on how to live a holy life before God. These laws were passed down through the generations to ensure that humanity could maintain a clean spiritual state. While the Bible codifies these laws for Israel, the banned books show that purity was always an essential part of God's covenant with his people. These laws weren't just about following ritual rules. They were about maintaining a life that was set apart for God's purposes. The sacrificial system formalized under Moses in Leviticus was a central part of Israel's worship, but it didn't start there. According to the banned books, the practice of sacrifice was handed down from Adam through Noah and Abraham, long before Moses received the laws on how to offer sacrifices. In Leviticus 1-7, we find detailed instructions on how to offer burnt offerings, sin offerings, and peace offerings as acts of worship and atonement. But according to the Book of Jubilees, these laws were part of an ancient tradition practiced by the righteous since the days of Adam. The Book of Jubilees, Jubilees 6:1-4, describes how Noah offered sacrifices after the flood, just as Adam had done after the fall. These sacrifices were acts of atonement for sin, but they were also a way to show devotion to God. The banned books tell us that the system of sacrifice formalized by Moses was a continuation of this ancient practice, not a new command. For Moses and the Israelites, the sacrificial system was a way to maintain their relationship with God. But the banned books reveal that this practice had been part of God's plan since the beginning, serving as a means to restore the broken relationship between humanity and the Creator. Throughout the banned books of the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible, we've seen how the divine laws given to Moses were not entirely new. They were part of an ancient tradition that stretched back to Adam. The laws of sacrifice, purity, Sabbath, and the 10 Commandments weren't introduced for the first time at Mount Sinai. Instead, they were a formalization of God's eternal law that had been guiding humanity since creation. These laws shaped the identity of God's people and were designed to keep them in a covenant relationship with their Creator. By exploring the hidden truths in these banned texts, we gain a deeper understanding of how God's commandments are timeless, connecting the patriarchs from Adam to Moses in a continuous story of faith, obedience, and holiness.